Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org.
Well, thank you all very much. Thanks for coming out tonight. I want to get to the return, but before we do, as Laurie was mentioning, you had quite the career before you wrote and published your first novel.
Yes, I have a speckled past.
Well, it was an interesting past.
Yeah.
And what I wondered is, a lot of writers just write,
Yeah.
and they do what they can,
Yeah.
but then they just write.
Yeah.
So where was the novelist when you were a U.S. Army medic and at the White House? And
It was in deep hiding.
he was.
Oh yeah, the whole thing was an escape from having to write.
Ah, the life was an escape from having
Oh
to
yeah,
write.
yeah. Oh, it was dreadful. I guess you could say I had writer's block for like 45 years. The first novel, to give you an idea, my first novel under my own name was published when I was 61.
Wow.
So, hope for the dead, I suppose.
So a lot of people have to face that, which is they
Yeah.
want to do this thing. Maybe it's writing, maybe it's something
Yeah.
else, and they avoid it and they avoid it and avoid it. What was not to put you on the couch, but why were you avoiding it? What was it that intimidated you about that process?
Well, I think it was just simple lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And I was always a writer. I mean, I was writing. I was drawing comic books when I was 8, and I wrote all throughout high school and all throughout college. Part of it was my education. I went to a school that was a bastion of modernism, and I was told when I arrived that everything that I liked, all the books that I liked, all the novels that I liked, were garbage.
Yeah.
And all the novels they wanted me to like, I couldn't understand. So the message was, you can't write. You're not a writer. You're a hack maybe, but you're not a writer. And so that went on for a long time, and it would never have ended if I hadn't had this relationship with my cousin, who asked me to write a book for him, and the rest is history. I mean, literally, it was money on the table. I needed money. Had a daughter in college, and he flashed money, and I said, sure, I'll do it. I mean, I had never written a novel before, but I wrote a novel, and it sold 300,000 copies.
But that was under his name.
All under his name, yes.
All under his name?
Yeah, the problem was I was in the impression that he was a lawyer and a politician, and he was doing this on the sideline, and sooner or later he would sort of laugh and say, yeah, I don't write those books. Gruber writes those books, and I would have this career. That was my fantasy. But in fact, he gave up being a lawyer and gave up being a politician and became an author. I mean, that was who he was. His entire identity was built around the fact that he was writing these novels, which he was not writing.
But to some degree, that must have been almost helpful for you initially to kind of hide behind that shield.
Absolutely.
Because that gave you freedom, right?
Absolutely. It was. One reason I don't resent him stealing all the copyrights was because I would not be a novelist were it not for him.
He taught, in a way, that taught you that you were a
Absolutely.
novelist.
Yes, absolutely.
You can't underestimate the fear of the blank page when you face it for the first time and realize, I have to fill it up completely with all those words and no one can do it for me.
It affects your mental stability. The creation of characters and the creation of fiction is a close cousin to madness. You may have heard that lots of writers like to get drunk a lot, and that's one of the reasons. It's people who take up writing don't understand the potential erosion of the self when you're spending your entire waking time by yourself, alone, with people who don't exist.
Yeah.
Not only that, but they're talking to you.
Oh, yeah?
Let me say this very, very clearly. You're not making up what they say. They're actually talking to you in your head. And they don't stop when you leave that little room. It's very hard on your loved ones because you're not quite there. So I was concerned about that, about my mental, which is why I went to science. I went to government. These are highly rational fields. Oh boy, I'm going to be protected against that crazy stuff. And so I did for a while, and then now I'm just as crazy as I need to be.
And now, speaking of madness,
Yes, speaking.
before this book was written,
Oh yeah, right. That story.
there was another book that tried to get written.
Yeah.
And this is where the writers can really, well,
Yeah.
I'll let you tell the story.
Well,
But you tried to write a book and it didn't happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story. I had a two-book contract with Holt. One was, the first book was The Good Son, which came out in 2010. And I decided I was going to write a book that was very different than any book I had written before. I had become interested in memory and the brain and in the self, and I wanted to write a book about I wanted to write a psychological thriller. So I finished it probably in the middle of, or the fall of 2011. I sent it in to my agent and my editor, and they said, "We hate this. This is a terrible book. This book can't be published." I said, "Well, I'll rewrite it." And I did. I rewrote it for 6 months, changing all the things that they said they didn't want. And it was still terrible. They wouldn't accept it. So here I am. This is like the spring of 2012. 18 months of my life has been consumed, and I have nothing to show for it. This is a terrible professional disaster. So I went up to a friend of mine's house in Vermont, and I was fairly disconsolate. But I said, well, if I don't get back on the horse now and write a book, I will never write again. And so this is unbearably hot here.
Oh, is it? I'm
Oh,
sorry.
it's unbelievable.
Okay.
It's like being in, it's like, yeah. So I was, it turned out that about around this time I was reading Carlos Fuentes, The Old Gringo, and I decided to steal the plot of The Old Gringo because I couldn't think of a plot fast enough, and so I did. I started writing this book, and I wrote it in 6 months. I did a lot of research, but when I pick up the book and I look through it, I get this really strange and very disconcerting feeling that I didn't write it. I guess what I'm saying is I didn't plan it. I didn't work into it as I have with all of my other books. I didn't think about it and stir it in my. There wasn't time for that. I just wrote it on pure thriller chops after 22 thrillers, so I know how to do this. It just came out. Bang, bang, bang.
Okay, so I have one more question
Yeah, sure, go
for
ahead.
Michael, but then I would love to turn it over to you guys if you have some questions as well. And so what I would like you to do
Sure.
is finish this sentence for me.
Okay.
If writing has taught me anything, it has taught me what?
It taught me to get used to failure.
Not be afraid of it?
Well, I'm always afraid of it, but if you have a low tolerance of failure, stay away from writing fiction, because it's all failure. You know, Flaubert put it better than anybody else. He said, we bang out tunes on broken pots for bears to dance to, when all the time we want to make the stars weep. And that's true. Nothing in anything that anybody ever wrote is what it was in the moment. Even after working it through and working it through and working it through. That's the real reason. The highfalutin reason is novels mock up or imitate the narrative voice that constitutes yourself. Right now, as you're listening to me, there's a thing in your head that's saying what's happening, right? But if you were all reading, instead of listening to me, if you were all reading a novel, that voice would be stilled, and the narrative voice would be talking to you. If you're really absorbed in a novel, that's what we mean when we say we lose ourselves in a novel.
Yeah.
And the novel is the only thing that'll do that. There are other forms in which a story is told, and that's why we have movies and plays and so on like that. But a novel is quite different. It's not like poetry. It's not underneath language, as poetry has to be. It's a substitute for a life. You're reading about, you are experiencing, Long John Silver, Miss Jean Brodie and Yosseri, and those people are in your head. And if they're really good, they'll stay in your head. You'll never get rid of them. They'll be part of you. Part of the narrative of your life are the novels that you've read. The stuff in your head that teaches you what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a man, what it is to be a citizen, what it is to be down, what it is to be up, how you're supposed to respond to this or that, was all put in your head by fiction of one kind or another. Anatole France said it very well. He said, stories teach us how to live. That's why we tell them.